Thank you, Mr. Knopper. So I'm going to call to order the Committee of Council meeting here on Monday, October 25th at 7:28 p.m. As it is following our special meeting of council at 6:45. Doing it on Zoom due to restrictions, and as per the previous meetings, if you have any questions or comments, they can be emailed in to pnopper@townofstandrews.ca. Jumping into for the third straight meeting this evening, all members of council are here. I'll look for an approval of the agenda, but I'm hoping to have a friendly amendment. I'm hoping to actually add that we go to closed session in regards to the Local Governance Act 68(1)(c), information that could cause financial loss or gain to a person or local government, or could jeopardize negotiations leading to an agreement or contract. So if I could have a mover to amend, that would be ideal. So we can go into close. I see Deputy Mayor Akaji and seconded by Councillor Heenan. So first, we'll any discussions on that amendment? Seeing none. So all in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. That is everybody. It's been amended. So we'll go back to approve the agenda. So all those in favor of approving the agenda now that it's been amended. Could I have a mover, I guess, first of all? Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Hurdle. Any discussion on the agenda now? None. All in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye. And that is everybody. So the agenda has been passed. Looking for disclosure of conflict of interest. Myself, I will be declaring one on the bylaw respecting the stopping up and permanent closure part of Victoria Terrace. I know we're just working on wording tonight, but I'll be looking for you to lead that section, Deputy Mayor, as you have in the previous. Is there any other disclosure of conflict of interest at this time? Perfect, seeing none. All right, so there is no presentations. So again, we are going to jump through correspondence and jump right into the bylaws themselves. A reminder that this is just setting the wording, so we don't need to debate, but it is a good time to get clarifying questions. And you'll note that even in all of our different portfolios that there are some discussions that will be happening this evening. So with that being said, finance and administration, we will jump into, and that will be Deputy Mayor Akaji.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. We've been working on the budget, as you know, and this is in relation to it with the reference number of FA 211007. And it's the approval of the 2022 Town of St. Andrews budget. We've done 4 drafts, and there's the 3 sections that we have there. I don't have any figures plugged in yet, but I know that Mr. Spear and Emily have been working very due diligently on this, and there'll be numbers to plug in, but
I think for the sake of it, Deputy Mayor, since there's so many blanks in this motion, unless I don't think I'd read it, because it will just be like something blank, unless anyone has any concerns over the wording right now. That'll be all filled in for next meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Spear?
That's correct, Your Worship. And honestly, it probably is the same as you saw last budget, but we were waiting after the meeting on presentation on Wednesday night to see if there's any further adjustments before we finalize the motion.
Thank you. So if you're okay with that, Deputy Mayor, I think that's probably fine for tonight, because it's literally every second word's a blank right now. We probably won't get that much out of it until we see the actual motion.
You think I'm cursing?
All right, so I guess at this point that's your only motion, which is rare, but probably a nice break. But we do have to have under that a discussion on amendment number 2 to bylaw 1603, a procedural bylaw for the town of St. Andrews. So there is a bit of a staff report on this. Mr. Spear, Mr. Knopper, who's going to speak to this one specifically?
Mr. Knopper can start unless he wants to keep typing, but he provided the staff report.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll discuss this. Actually, Your Worship, it will be a quite little bit of a change. It'll be amendment number 3. It was my apologies on that. So bylaw 1603 is a procedural bylaw for the organization and operation of the council for the town of St. Andrews. So this does set the guidelines for what council can do within the operation and within meetings of regular meetings, special meetings, committee meetings, process of passing bylaws, quorums of meetings, etc. So every council gets an opportunity to make adjustments to the committee or to this give me 1 second, to this bylaw. So at this time, the mayor, myself, and the CEO Spear have gone through the document and provided suggestions to council. This does not have to move forward at the next meeting if council would like further discussion or process on it, but some of the changes are minor. For instance, page 4, section 1 under the authority, it's no longer the Municipalities Act, it is the Local Governance Act, so that's a change that needs to occur within the document. There are further points here, so points of discussion for council can be like the deputy mayor, as this council experience, the deputy mayor went to a vote at the first meeting. An option is that it can go based on the most votes gathered from the municipal election. So that's something that can be discussed if council would like to. Regular meetings, and speaking with the mayor, it was thought to bring everything into one meeting time at 6:30 p.m. So that would be a change from the 7 p.m. start time, just based on the amount of discussion that council has and the packages you're dealing with. There is a time limit of 2.5 hours for any specific meeting. So that would take you to 9 o'clock versus 9:30. So just looking at how everybody's work schedules, how this plays out, it gives you the ability, you can go over if you need to, but without detrimenting your own selves. So we're just looking out for everybody's actions there. Under the, I think something that the mayor wanted to bring forward, especially when it comes to all of the meetings, would be a beginning section when it comes to land recognition for the Pescatomakati. I believe that's something that a lot of municipalities have gone towards, as well as something that was generated through discussions. Special meetings, of course, same thing. Changes to the agendas. There was a section that under the committee meeting that you need unanimous consent of council. Felt strongly that this could be 2/3 of council, as that was a similar process that was brought forward in all the other meetings. So just bringing everything in line. Bylaws, you typically host a public hearing of objections, although it was never regulated within your process. It would be smart to write it into your processes so that it just becomes a continued practice. One of the discussions was the mayor entering debate. One suggestion, or I've provided a couple of suggestions here, which would allow the mayor to enter debate while still remaining as chair, as long as the entirety of council would be allowance of that. The mayor is allowed to provide factual information and educational information in the event something was missed, but to enter debate, that could be an option and availability. And council, we had discussed the continuation of this committee structure meeting. Now, one of the suggestions we're bringing up is the regular scheduled meetings. We actually go to 2 regular scheduled meetings a month, the first and the third Mondays of the month. That way we can have a 2-week time frame to bring you guys more information, and we could have a lively debate. Instead of having to call a certain number of special meetings, we would have these scheduled and set. This would also give the opportunity for councillors to meet with staff to talk about their specific portfolio as well. So by removing the committee meeting, this can create a more structured setting for council, and I believe something councillors are looking forward to. And again, just changes to the Municipalities Act and the addition of under the standing subcommittees on page 23, just the addition of the Planning Advisory Committee and Asset Management, as well as Environmental Advisory Committee. CEO Spear, would you like to add anything?
No, this is also 3 readings are required, so it still gives you lots of time to review and either make recommendations for the first reading or even going into the second reading. I think the most important thing that the clerk touched on was probably moving to 2 special meetings or 2 regular meetings a month. That it'll allow us to debate stuff instead of putting everything at the, basically having it all set in 4 of us at the end of the month and then trying to go through it all in one evening makes a lot of extra work, especially as we've seen and with the previous council too. If you're sitting at a committee meeting, you want to debate there, you've got your ideas, you got your thoughts organized. So even if you think about it, it may not necessarily work this way, but if you split it in half and have 2 nights to do it with half, then it gives you more time to go through that. So I think that'll make it more efficient. The one other change you mentioned was that the mayor and clerk would now set the agenda. which is typical of most municipalities. It doesn't mean that anybody else can't provide requests through the clerk and to the mayor, and knowing Mayor Henderson, he's very willing to bring anything forward, given the appropriate time. It just makes it a heck of a lot more efficient to move things forward. So I hope this will speed things up, and then instead of kind of put a whole bunch of stuff in one night at the first of the month, it'll allow us to break it up a little bit more so that specific items can be given more discussion and debate because they're split into two different meetings.
Yeah, if I could add on to that. So just in regards to the 2 regular meetings, the idea behind it is if someone emails and said, hey, you just missed this monthly meeting, you're going to have to wait a month. They're like, well, it's urgent. Then we call a special meeting. So let's just acknowledge the fact that we need to meet, twice a month and do some motions. It's versus special meetings. That way it's regularly advertised. The public's used to when they're going to be. We have a regular time versus, is it this Monday? Is it not? We have a regular time. And then the committee meeting that we're doing tonight, we're going through the motions. Although it is nice to do, the reality is it's a meeting that you actually don't have to do. What I'd actually propose is that Chris, Paul, and I meet regularly every single week, is once a month. Should you want to, you could have a meeting with the 3 of us, either dial in or be in person if you're in town. And we go through your portfolio because we want to be more portfolio managers. You want to take a leadership role. So if I had something about business, tourism, and heritage, and I'm a town council member, I would email Councillor Hurdle and ask him if he could get that on the agenda for me. With that being said, is all these meetings, I have no problem making you all aware of when I'm meeting with each and every one of you. And the other, if you wanted to jump on those, we're all a team. I see no reason why you can't jump on those. You need to, probably not, but if you'd like to, you can. And what I think that does is it almost gives us a quick monthly one-on-one where you can bring anything forward, and we're not just doing this routine meeting of just checking wording. So that's really the spirit of that. And then as far as me entering debate, I don't see it more entering debate. I see it that I'm the one that a lot of time attends meetings with these outside user groups, because it just gives me the ability, if there's a factor that you don't know, that allows me to actually bring it into the debate. That's all. So if I met with a group and they said, this is a concern, well, I could speak up during debate and say, well, I did meet with them and they let me know this is their concern. It just gives you more information than the mayor being quiet and then, not having all details. Like, we do our best to update you, but I think there'd be some benefits behind that since, fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of the user groups I do meet with. Is there any questions on some of those? I know we flew through them, but is there any big questions? But we kind of hinted at kind of mixing it up a little bit, but these special meetings, not knowing when they are, what time they start, I'd really like to get a consistent schedule for all of you where you can expect to be in here every second Monday. Councillor Heenan.
Yes, Your Worship and Council, I would appreciate knowing that we have a meeting every second week, because as we all do, we all have other commitments and it becomes quite hard. And it's not that council is not important. I'm not trying to deny that. It's just the fact that if we know every second, if someone asks me to do something, I can say, no, that's council night. And I 100% back that, because people aren't going to have to wait a month to have it put on. I mean, it's a 2-week waiting period. That's it. And as far as the other changes, they're all minor in my opinion, and I have nothing to add or take away. Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Thank you, Councillor Heenan. Councillor Blanchard.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So the majority of the suggestions, recommendations, I think I'm supportive of. Certainly, as Councillor Heenan had mentioned, the regular meetings, the 2 regular meetings per month, I'm very much supportive of that. A couple things though stuck out to me. One was on the agenda being set by the mayor and the clerk. Again, because you are meeting with sort of the committee, the chairs of those committees, I would like to sort of see it reflected that the mayor and the clerk set the agenda based on those discussions. I don't worry about it with this particular council, and I don't worry about it with you, Your Worship, but yeah. You just never, I don't know, you never know in the future who that mayor will be, and they could really dictate and determine, the course and the agenda. And I would like to see it reflected that it should be based on those discussions with the committee chairs. I think that would be helpful, beneficial. And the only other thing I would mention with regards to those particular meetings. We're talking about one meeting, I think I guess it's section 34, the council committee talks about members of council will meet with senior staff and the mayor. I think those are good, obviously, to have, but I would maybe prefer to see the language instead of will, maybe may meet it, just because if there isn't much going on, I wouldn't want to see it the requirement to have a meeting where maybe there isn't that much that needs to be done. Not to say that there isn't always work that needs to be done, but I would just prefer to see may, just to give some flexibility to the councilors and to the mayor and staff. Those are the only two changes I'd like to see.
I think those are both great suggestions, actually. So Mr. Knopper, we can probably capture those. The other thing too is what probably Mr. Knopper, Mr. Spiro will do is send the ones that we have before us in advance. You might be able to just say, I'm good with it this month, go ahead. You know what I mean? You might not need to actually sit down and have a physical meeting. I know how busy everybody gets, or, you know, you might say, that's good. Could we please add this one? You know what I mean? It's not debate. It's just sending you what the agenda is. So I think that those are two good suggestions for sure. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor?
Will these two meetings be publicized? Like that, will they be on CHCO TV so that we're, you know, letting the public know, but that we are still following, you know,
Yeah, that's a good question. We never actually talked about CHO airing the second one, but that'll be a good follow-up just to make sure. I know that when we do it in Zoom, it makes it pretty easy for them because they can just produce what we have before us. Correct, Mr. Knopper?
Through your worship, that's correct. I also provide them a digital copy after the meeting the following day. So they also get a hard copy so they can replay it and modify it to their structure as needed.
I dare say fresher footage is always encouraged by them so they don't run the same meeting over, that they can have some new content. So they'll probably welcome the change, actually. Any other member? All right. If anything pops up, obviously, you know, to do this, we have to do 3 readings, correct, Mr. Knopper? So there'll be plenty of time to provide more input and any changes that you see. So this isn't obviously the last conversation on this, and unfortunately, it'll take us 3 months to even make this change. But we wanted to introduce it to you tonight. So at this point,
Your worship,
yep.
just wondering what direction you would like. Would you like this to be brought forward for first reading as the draft as presented with the changes discussed?
Look, general consensus on council with the changes that Councillor Blanchard addressed. Would you guys like to see this come forward for the next? Okay, seeing head nods, thumbs up. So please proceed. At this point, we'll switch over to Public Works, which is Councillor Blanchard, but I'll just pass it over to you, Deputy Mayor, for the first one. So I'll be back after. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, Councillor Blanchard, Public Works, and the bylaw 2105, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this be reference number PW 210804. This is the bylaw 21-05, a bylaw representing the stopping up and permanent closure of part of Victoria Terrace Street, third and final reading. So we'll go through the background here, I guess, and read the motion as well. So the town has received a request to permanently close a portion of Victoria Terrace Street for a new housing development to be located at PID 151-88543. To close the portion of Victoria Terrace Street, council has to implement a road closure bylaw. Provided with this motion report is a copy of the bylaw 21-05, a bylaw respecting the stopping up and permanent closure of part of Victoria Terrace. First reading was September the 8th, 2021. Public hearing of objections was September 27th, 2021. And the second reading was October the 4th, 2021. Again, the motion that council grant leave for the third and final reading of bylaw 21-05, a bylaw respecting the stopping up and permanent closure of Victoria Terrace Street in the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchard. Are there any additions or anything that you'd like to see change, council? Or is it all right to go forward for our next meeting? I don't see anybody, so I would say that is fine to go ahead then. Correct? All right, I can invite the mayor back in.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So we're moving into the discussion on the downtown one-way Water Street. I don't think we need to all go through and express our support. Mr. Knopper, you're just wondering, we want a survey sent out to the business community, is that correct? And to the community?
Through you, your worship, that's correct. That's what we'd be looking for. It's because the one-way street has recently come down. It would be good to get the public's feedback on the structure, how it worked this year, and potential suggestions for next year for council to consider.
Perfect. I think opening up to the business community and the greater community is always good. I do note that some of the changes you've noted, like more parking spots, accessible parking spots, things like that are good suggestions. So, let's circle back and have that discussion after we hear from the public, just to keep the meeting moving along, unless anyone has anything objecting to a survey. But it's always good to hear from the public on that one. And I think it's safe to say that overall it was much improved and much appreciated versus the previous year. So I look forward to seeing the results on that.
Through you, your worship, just one moment before we release the survey out to the public, we'll provide council an opportunity to provide feedback or any additional questions. So please watch your emails accordingly.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So discussion on End of Bar Road. At this point, I think it goes to Mr. Spear. Is that correct?
Either or, your worship, we both been working at it and shedding tears and pulling out hair. But I'd left, Paul did most of the report, so I'll let him kind of walk through it as he did the fine details, so have the opportunity.
Sure. Thank you, CAO Spear. So your worship, before you is a staff background report on the Bar Road jurisdiction. Terry, acting asset and operations manager, and I met with DCI in September after there was discussion from council to find out whose jurisdiction or ownership of the land is at the end of Bar Road. The town presumed that we owned the property up to where the pavement ends, and beyond that was not town land. So through discussions with DTI, it was determined that the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development has ownership of the land. And in order to do any minor maintenance for fixing potholes or additional gravel or anything, to which council said they would be open to discussion, but not doing major maintenance, so seawalls or anything like that. We received an email back from the DNRED. In order to complete repairs and maintenance at the end of Bar Road, a license of occupation is needed, and at a price of $825 to get a permit to do the work on the land. If the license is pursued, a recommendation should be that we should be looking for a waive of this fee to do land on provincial grounds, as it is their land, and it would be taxpayer money from the town. So staff are seeking direction from council. So does council want to spend the funds to get the license of occupation and complete the minor repairs to the roadway? So I guess the ownership of the Bar Road jurisdiction has been determined that it is the Department of Natural Resources. It is their land. So if we have to get a license of occupation, then it is on their land. Does council want to petition DNR to complete the repairs to their jurisdiction? Or does council want to petition DNR to waive the fees of the license for occupation, and staff are seeking direction on this?
So I'll quickly just weigh in, and then I'll see if anyone on council feels contrary. I would say that we pay the money, we fix it, and then we meet with them and ask for our money back. And the only reason I'm saying that is versus argue with them and tie it up for months, when the reality is visitors don't care who owns the land. They just want it to be, in good condition. If you're Minister's Island, you're a little frustrated as well, because, it's technically not on the island. They're looking at the town, they're looking at the province, people are pointing fingers. Well, if we pay this, we actually have a document that says we don't own the land. And that's something we can file away, we have, because it's been a debate of where the property line was before in the past. It probably will in the future, but if we pay them $825 to do work on their land and get a permit, it's not our land. And then as far as that money, it's $825. I'm not saying it's no amount of money, but we can go back with them and say, you have a gym and it's your land and you're not taking care of it, and you're making us pay to work on your land on something you should have been doing in the first place. I just think that that's just the best approach versus us getting you pay, we pay, and then it ties it up for another month. But I'll open it up to council to see if they have any views differently, I guess. Councillor Heenan. Go ahead.
Yes, your worship and council. I am very much in favor of our mayor's take on this. It also helps me get my head around the fact about liability issues on who owns the land. So this $800 that we are going to spend is money well spent. Because if we do fix it, we're not taking liability. It shows that the province owns it. So I am totally in favor of that. It's money well spent to have that document. And I thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you, Councillor Heenan. Councillor Dubuchel.
Thank you, Worship. I was out on my bike the other night and I took a spin down there. It seems like it's all pretty well fixed up. Just wondering if we did that or those guys did that.
That's news to me. Did that spark a conversation, Mr. Spear, Mr. Nopper?
Not sure, your worship, will have to investigate it.
Look at you, Councillor Dubuchel, already back in town on your bike and keeping us up to date with
It
changes.
was dark, but it seemed like it was definitely in better shape than it was in the spring. So I just figured the work had been done.
Well, that's a good heads up. So we'll follow up before we respond on that one, but we'll assume that it isn't right now until we hear 100% if you're down there in the dark. But if it's fixed up, ideal. Let's just keep moving on. But if not, let's go with that. Unless someone again is contrary minded to that, I think that's just the way to resolve it. But I think there's a longer term issue that this has been talked about all year. It's the end of October, past peak season. We don't want to get into this debate next year. So who is looking after it next year is going to be the real question, right? So, but in the meantime, let's get it where it needs to be. And hopefully, like you said, it's already done. So unless someone has anything else, we'll keep moving along so I can get you out of here at 8:30. All right. So at this point, there's nothing under public safety. So we are going under business, tourism, heritage, and culture, which is Councillor Hurdle, which a bylaw looks a little familiar to us.
A little bit familiar. Thank you, Your Worship. This is reference number BTHC 211002. Bylaw, subject is bylaw 2106, bylaw of the town of St. Andrews to impose a special business improvement levy for 2021 for second reading. And the background is this, that as part of downtown beautification initiatives, the St. Andrews Business Improvement Area collects an annual levy from its members to pay for various projects and events. The BIA, established in 1984, is a geographical area between Water Street from Princess Royal to Elizabeth Street. All businesses within this area are within the BIA and subject to the annual levy. As per the Business Improvement Area Act of New Brunswick, council must set the levy annually by bylaw, which also includes approval of their budget and a public hearing of objection. The public hearing of objection requires a 2-week notification period and a 15-day response period after the final notification. The date for the public hearing of objections will be Monday, November 29th, 2021. The first reading is Monday, October 25th, 2021 today. And the motion is this, that council grants leave for a second reading of bylaw 21-06, a bylaw of the town of St. Andrews to impose a special business improvement levy for 2022 in the town of St. Andrews.
Perfect. I don't think we have much discussion on this one. We'll move it forward. We just voted in favor of it. So it's safe to say that we're good to go to second reading on that one as well. And of course, we had no one opposed to it either. Thank you for that, Councillor Hurdle. So we're now skipping recreation and community service, but we are in planning and economic development, which should be, we have a few there. So we'll go over to Councillor Heenan.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, Deputy Mayor. My first is PED 210805, bylaw 21-04, a bylaw respecting encroachment upon public spaces in the town of St. Andrews, third and final reading. Staff, the background, staff has been working on the development of the encroachment bylaw to establish regulations on the use of town space. The bylaw provides an overview of rules, the process of applications, approvals, permitting, appeals, and penalties. This bylaw, under the authority of council, will provide staff with the necessary tools to review, approve, or deny uses in public spaces, including roads, parks, sidewalks, easements, right-of-way owned by the town. During the discussion at the September 8th, 2021 council meeting, and staff was directed to make changes regarding typical use and the need for permits beyond 1 meter of a building facade to bylaw 21-04. This has been added to the bylaw. First reading was September the 8th, 2021. Second reading was October the 4th, 2021. And public hearings of objections was October the 25th, 2021. And the action would be a motion that council grants leave for third and final reading of bylaw 21-04, a bylaw respecting encroachment upon public spaces in the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you very much, Councillor Heenan. That one sounds like it's ready to go ahead unless anyone has any concerns. Seeing none, so we will move that one ahead. Your next one.
Your worship, just before you jump into the next one, I did speak with Planner Gopin on this. It's not amendment Z 21-04. It will actually be zoning bylaw Z 21-04 for first reading. It is to take over the Z 21-01, and I'll let him explain further.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Knopper. So it could be an amendment to the zoning bylaw. I've talked about this, we talked about it in the priority setting session. This was something that I was going to bring forward. At times I've called it the omnibus bill, but it's basically taking a bunch of changes that we've noticed need to be made in the zoning bylaw. For example, if you remember, there was a gentleman who needed to get a temporary use application to have a short-term rental on in a detached garage because he was in the MR1 zone and didn't actually allow for that. So changes like that, like little things that we've just been living with the bylaw for 6 months and have noticed need to be made. And then there's a few that relate to housing and make it a little bit easier to develop housing, lowering parking requirements for apartment buildings to 1 space per unit, raising accessory dwelling unit space from 600 square feet, which is pretty small, to 900 square feet. So there's a number of changes there. Some of them are kind of procedural. Some of them are a little bit more substantial. Hopefully you've had a chance to read the report, the change report. And I know that Mr. Spear, Mr. Knopper, and I will have probably a few more changes before first reading that will go into that document. We have some things they've mentioned that they would like to see changed as well. So we'll be speaking about that a little bit, but just wanted to sort of get this process rolling. It's called a repeal and replace. So you basically, instead of having an amending bylaw that sits separately to the zoning bylaw, you're basically saying, let's take everything we've done, including the rezoning to 10805. Let's take all the amendments up to this point and just have a new zoning bylaw. So it's all in one package. It's neat. It's there. And that's pretty much it. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that at this time or.
Sounds good. So are you thinking that we're going to go to first reading next week, or do you think it needs a little bit more time with these changes, I guess?
Well, I'd leave that up to Mr. Knopper as the clerk. If he thinks, that will be the time to bring it forward, or if he wants to wait until we have the draft is ready to discuss first and then go forward, because there are some things that I think are probably worth discussing, and you don't just want to kind of gloss over. Of course, it needs a public hearing. It'll need all that, like any other Community Planning Act bylaw, so there will be time to get it out to the public.
I guess my question is, like, when I get into like MR2 lot requirements, like it looks like the minimum the minimum lot frontage goes from 100 meters to 30.5. Is that like that's quite significant of a change, is it not? Like that's a third of what it was before. Like I'm just wondering, usually needs to be read them through, but I almost wonder, and I know you did a great job on the staff report. This isn't warranting of a presentation because that's quite a change, right? Like and again, I'm not arguing that it's not a good change. It's just it's less than a third of what it was.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to maybe once this week, Mr. Knopper and Mr. Spear and I are going to talk about the bylaw. So maybe once we've done that and I've had chances to make whatever updates and changes, then I give a presentation on it at whenever Mr. Knopper feels is appropriate.
Council, how does that sound to you? I think that again, some of them are just I wouldn't say that they were oversights, but when you're talking about like the church lane and stuff like that, those are easy little changes just to make sure that there's not cracks through the bylaw, because it's a big document. It's a lot of moving parts in the community. Those are easier, but some of these, I guess you could say, real changes that are significant to help us with our housing problem. I think council would like just an opportunity to fully understand and also understand the repercussions of making such a change, and making sure that huge apartment buildings aren't beside neighbors in residential communities. Not to say that it will be, but I think that there's opportunity for council to understand these a little bit better, unless council feels otherwise. I don't think they do. Perfect. So unless everyone's good, I'd rather just move on this one tonight. We'll get the rest of the changes and get a presentation on, again, the significant changes to this particular, I guess you'd say, I don't know if it's a repeal, amendment, whatever, but we'll have that all sorted out for the next time. So appreciate that. All right. So I think you've got another one as well, don't you, Councillor Heenan?
Yes, Your Worship and Council, I have PED 211005, amendments to the Planning Advisory Committee policies for the town of St. Andrews. At the October 20th, 2021 Planning Advisory Committee, the PAC reviewed the governing policy documents for the committee. The PAC recommended the following change. 1, Town of St. Andrews Council Member Policy for the Planning Advisory Committee. Section A, role of the Planning Advisory Committee with the removal of the term quasi-judicial. 2, Town of St. Andrews Rules of Operation and Procedures Planning Advisory. Reordered sections 20 to 24. Section 31 considered to have a staggered terms to membership appointment by council. Section 33, addition of agenda titles, new business and member comments, questions. And the third bullet is roles of Planning Advisory Committee, Development Officer and Building Inspector. There are minor spelling edits to section 1.14 and 2.9. The action would be that council accepts the amended document PAC, St. Andrews Operating Rules and Procedures, which was revised on October the 21st, 2021, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Heenan. I appreciate that. Question for probably you. So I guess the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee, Mr. Fleming, has seen all these changes as well and obviously supports them, does he?
Yes, Your Worship, he is the one who advised us to have them, and a couple of members pointed out the spelling errors. It basically was done as a committee.
Perfect.
And it was asked for me to bring them forward, which I sent on to Mr. Knopper. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, appreciate that. I think that based on this looks like the PAC wanting just some updates and some changes. I don't see any concern from us. There's no concern from staff over these changes either, or they would have brought it up in a staff report. So it looks like we're good to go on that one again, unless someone feels contrary. All right, that's it for motions on this one. So we do have the registers attached. Is there anything that staff wanted to highlight? I know that usually you bring it forward in the form of motion or conversation, but it's safe to say everything that you want it covered for this meeting out of the registers has been addressed. Is that correct?
From my standpoint, Mr. Knopper had anything?
No, Your Worship, we're good.
Perfect. And anything from you all have it. I don't want to go through it line for line and prolong the meeting reading the same thing. Is there anything out of those registers that any member of council had any concerns over at this time? Keep in mind that when we do switch the procedural bylaw, that we'll be going through motions, but we'll also be going through your register once a month. So that way you'll be actively involved in your own portfolio. And of course, if there's any concerns you have in someone else's, shoot them an email, have a meeting, or even show up to their actual meeting because we can post those for you. So, but you'll see that they'll become a lot more relevant when we actually are actively involved in them. That's the goal of all this. So unless there's anything coming out of those, and again, if anything does, just shoot me an email or shoot Chris or Paul one as well. And we'll make sure to bring it up at the next meeting. So there's nothing under new business. Question period, anything come in, Mr. Knopper?
Through you, your worship, no questions have come through. I did let the public know when we were at the third last motion, so they've had plenty of time to either call in or provide an email.
Thank you, Mr. Nopper. And any councillor or deputy mayor's comments? I have none myself either. So at this point, I'll be looking for someone to move at 8:07 p.m. Council move into closed session for the Local Governance Act, Section 68(1)(c), information that could cause financial loss or gain to a person or to the local government, or could jeopardize negotiation leading to an agreement or contract. A mover, please. I've got a Councillor Blanchard, seconded by Councillor Hurdle. Discussion? None. All in favor of going to closed section, please signify by saying aye. That's everybody. We're in closed session. A motion to come out of closed session. I got Councillor Hurdle and seconded by Councillor Neal. All in favor of coming out of closed session. That's everybody. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Akaji, seconded by Councillor Gumashell. All in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Long meeting. Appreciate it.
Everyone.